strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean, hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached into heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she hath filled to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her, for she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication in
hold on a minute. What verse are you?
9.
Oh, 9. Okay, so let's stop right there. Verse 7 and 8. Now, there are many reasons why the Bible is going to point out that Israel is the whore.
Mm-hmm.
Many reasons why.
Yes.
Not just one reason. And
There's.
here, when we look at this prophecy from Revelation 18, verse 7 and 8, how much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her, for she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. So, if you can never be a widow, it means your husband can never die.
Yeah.
And the only way that can happen is if you're married to God, because He's eternal.
That's right. Amen.
And there's only one nation that ever married God.
It was Israel.
That was Israel. Now, notice the name here that's given to this woman in chapter 17 is the mother of harlots. She's a harlot, and she's the mother of harlots. Chapter 17, verse 5. Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So, we're going to look now at why God divorced Israel. Let's look to Isaiah chapter 50 in verse number 1. Isaiah 50 in verse number 1.
Thus saith the Lord, where is the bill of your mother's divorcement, whom I have put away? Or which of my creditors is it to whom I have sold you? Behold, for your iniquities have you sold yourselves, and for your transgressions is your mother put away.
So here's Isaiah prophesying to Israel, your mother is put away because of her transgressions. Now, it's going to get more bolder because 60 times God's going to call Israel a harlot or a whore. 60 times.
60 times.
Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 3. We want to read verse number 8 up to 14.
8 to 14. And I saw went for all causes whereby. Oh, wait. 3?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, 8 to what is it?
14.
Okay. And I saw went for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery. I had put her away. and given her a bill of divorce, yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. And it came to pass, through the lightness of her whoredom, that she defiled the land, and committed adultery with stones and stocks, lightness or fame. And yet for all this, treacherous sister Judah had not turned unto me with her whole heart, but feignedly, saith the Lord. And the Lord said unto me, the backsliding Israel hath justified herself more than treacherous Judah. Go and proclaim these words toward the north, and say, Return, thou backsliding Israel, saith the Lord. And I will not cause mine anger to fall upon you, for I am merciful, yet saith the Lord. And I will not keep anger forever. Only acknowledge thine iniquity, that thou hast transgressed against the Lord thy God, and hast scattered thy ways to the strangers under every green tree, and ye have not obeyed my voice, saith the Lord. Turn, O backsliding children, saith the Lord, for I am married unto you, and I will take you one of a city and two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion.
Okay, so you have to understand Israel's divided into two parts. Northern Israel, that's Samaria.
Mm-hmm.
And southern Israel, that's called Zion, which was Judah and Benjamin. So God divorced northern Israel for her whoredom and her treacherous sister Judah. Southern Israel played the harlot along with the northern Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So they're both guilty of harlotry.
Yeah.
And God, in verse number 8, it said, gave a bill of divorce. He was married to Israel.
Yeah.
And here he gives a bill of divorce. And it said in verse 8, because they played the harlot. So when you read Revelation and it says Mystery Babylon, the harlot, you'll see repeatedly in the Bible where God calls Israel a harlot. God is calling the Jewish people, and yet, although God divorced them, there in verse 14, do you see where the Lord said, I'm married unto you?
Mm-hmm.
Even though he divorced them, he said, I'm married unto you, O backsliding Israel. Now, this statement can't be made in the church where God is saying he's married to us, because we're only engaged.
Yeah.
None of us have married Christ. Nobody.
No.
Since the church began. Nobody has married Christ, but we're all engaged to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And God is married, even though he divorced Israel, he's married to Israel.
Yes.
And so he's crying, return unto me.
Divorced but married.
Now, think of it like this. God's divorced, and yet Israel is going to go through a slaughter in the Great Tribulation. But it won't kill all Israel.
No.
Some of them will survive.
Yeah.
And then the prophecy said, out of Zion comes the deliverer. And so in Romans 11, it says, all Israel will be saved. It means the remainder, whatever left over, that escaped the judgment of the Antichrist. So when God is saying that he's still married to them, and yet they wouldn't repent, you give them a bill of divorce. Now think about this. The marriage of Jesus Christ, who is God, is going to happen right there while Israel is still alive. That's his wife that he divorced is still alive, and yet he's going to marry another. You understand the statement I'm making?
No.
God divorced his wife. She's still alive, and now he's going to marry somebody else.
Christians.
Christianity. which are neither Jew or Gentile. It's both of them together making a new man. So, are you allowed to marry again while your other spouse is alive?
There's only two reasons though.
Yes. And that's if you were the
Adultery.
innocent.
Yeah.
Or if they, according to 1 Corinthians 7, if they left you, if the believer leaves the unbeliever,
Yeah.
Yeah.
then the believer is not in bondage in such cases. But if you're innocent, yeah, then you can remarry. God did.
Yes.
And so we're dealing with Israel as the harlot. Israel as the harlot. And the harlot, let's go back to Revelation 18. I want you to focus on two verses, 7 and 8. Okay, we're going to reread the verse again. Get this into your spirit. Revelation 18 in verse 7 and 8. Try and get this deep into your spirit. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. So when the Antichrist comes to slaughter Israel, God is saying, you've got to give her for what she's done. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen and am no widow. She never believes she can be a widow. And shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day. Do you notice in verse number 8 the phrase, one day? Everything will happen when?
One day.
In one day.
In one day.
Okay?
Death and mourning and famine. Oh, wow.
Death, mourning, and sorrow. And she shall be utterly burnt with fire. Now, we've got to separate the one day and another one day. There are two one days that we've got to concern ourselves with. The one day, and we're going to go back to Isaiah 47. Isaiah 47. And now we're going to read verse 7, 8, and 9. Isaiah 47. And we're going to focus on the one day when she becomes a widow. And the other one day is when the judgment is put on her, which is by the Antichrist. Those are two separate one-day events. So look at Isaiah 47, verse 7, 8, and 9.
This one in Isaiah is the prophecy, right? Of the other one to come.
Right.
Like, this is the prophecy, and then the one in Revelation is the
Is
fulfillment.
repeating it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's
No, it's not the fulfillment. It's repeating.
It's
the
repeating the prophecy of Isaiah. But it's amazing how John, in repeating the prophecy of Isaiah, he left out a very important statement. He didn't complete the whole prophecy. And so, in Isaiah 47, as we read, see if you can catch what's missing from the prophecy.
And thou saidest, I shall be a lady forever, so that thou didst not lay these things to thy heart, neither didst remember the latter end of it. Therefore, hear now this, thou that art given to pleasures, that dwellest carelessly, that sayest in thine heart, I am, and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. But these two things shall come to thee in a moment, in one day, the loss of children and widowhood. they shall come upon thee in their perfection, for the multitude of thy sorcery, and for the great abundance of thine
And
enchantments.
Yeah, which is witchcraft.
That's
So,
Enchanted.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly what that
what
is.
is God
And sorcery.
saying to Israel here through the prophet Isaiah? He said, in one day, two things will happen. But John said, in one day, one thing will happen. John said, you will become a widow.
Yeah.
But Isaiah said, two things will happen. You'll become a widow and you'll become childless. See, John doesn't mention being childless.
But maybe because there will be some left.
There
They
will
won't-
be.
They won't be completely childless because there
But-
will be some left.
That's not what the prophecy is about. Watch what happens in one day.
Yeah. and
The
then-
day that they killed the Lord Jesus Christ,
They became a widow.
they became a widow and they became childless.
Because they cannot produce another.
So now, although there's millions of Jews in the world, but none of them are children of God. They have not produced another child of God. And there's millions of them. Because today, to be a child of God, you must be born again.
Yeah.
And they reject the salvation message.
Yes, they did.
And so, we've got to focus on this prophecy here from Isaiah. You will be a widow and you will be childless in one day. Now, isn't it so ironic? When they killed Christ, they killed their husband.
Yes. Yes. The husband, man. Yes.
So did they know really what they
No.
They didn't know really
No.
what they
They
were
didn't
doing.
know.
They really didn't know. That's
That's
what
why
Jesus
God
said.
said,
That's
"Forgive
right.
them,
Exactly
forgive
what he
them,
said.
for they know not what they."
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
They had a husband right there in front of them and killed him
Yes.
and became childless.
Uh-huh.
That's a huge, huge statement we could dwell on for an awful long time.
Email.
So,
Want paper? Oh, you can have
Yes,
this.
paper.
Here. So you can have that.
let's go back to Revelation chapter 18. We're going to read on now from verse number 8. We'll go to verse 9 and we'll continue reading down.
And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her. And when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing far off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city. For in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth the merchandise any more. The merchandise of gold and silver, and precious stones, and of pearls, and fine linen, and purple, and silk, and scarlet, and all thine wood, and all manner vessels of ivory, and all manner vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, and iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. And the fruit that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand far off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, and purple and scarlet, and decked with golds and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company in ships, and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1 hour, it's spoken of twice. In 1 hour, this judgment will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And this city, this great city, is going to fall. Now, we should take time for a moment. We have Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21 as our judgment chapters, our eschatology chapters, the last day chapters, as to the judgment of Israel, what's going to happen in the land. And John is saying in 1 hour, this city will be judged. Nobody's going to buy anything from her anymore. So let's go to Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. Well, we don't have to read all of them. Matthew 24 will give us enough information. But the other chapters repeat Matthew 24.
What verse?
So from verse 15, this is the dead center of the tribulation. Verse number 15. Now John here in chapter 18 is saying her judgment will come. And can you imagine the judgment in chapter 18 is only happening in the middle of the tribulation. So what does that mean? Between chapter 18 and then chapter 19 is all about Jesus returning. So what happened to the 3.5 years that the Antichrist is supposed to rule? And you've got where's the information in Revelation? Because now, all the way up to chapter 18, we're only coming now to the judgment in chapter 18. And it looks like that 3.5 years that the Antichrist is actually in Jerusalem ruling is not in the book of Revelation. There's nothing much said about it at all. So let's read chapter 24, verse 15.
When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand.
Okay, before we go on, this is not really understood by a multitude of people. We're all divided on what is the abomination of desolation. Mm-hmm. There's a huge division. You'll hear all kinds of stories. Mm-hmm. What actually happened in the year 70 AD? There was a man who ruled in Rome. His name was Titus. And when he came to Rome in 70 AD, he went into the temple of God and he sacrificed a pig on the altar. And so that was a huge abomination. And many theologians look back there and they say, oh, the scripture's completed already. That was the abomination that makes desolate. But no, that wasn't it. Now, we're looking to the future. It hasn't happened yet. Israel is not surrounded right now by armies. And we already know the prophecies where Jesus said, I came in my Father's name, you didn't receive me. If another comes in his own name, you receive him. Mm-hmm. That's the Antichrist.
Yes. Mm-hmm. They did.
Then we know when the Antichrist surrounds Jerusalem, he's going to slaughter. So the abomination that makes desolate, this word desolate, it means to empty out a land, to make sure there's no inhabitants. That's desolation. Or to make something desolate, to empty it. And the abomination will be the Muslims, the Antichrist leading them, and they bring their demonic religion, which is Islam, and this Antichrist religion into the house of God, the temple of God, where the Antichrist sits on the throne, proclaims himself God. That's a huge blasphemy and an abomination. And he'll destroy all Jews. The ones that escape, the Bible said in the minor prophets, they go to the three mountains, Edom. Do we know who Edom is? Esau, Jacob's brother.
Yeah.
So that's Edom, Ammon, and Moab. Who are Ammon and Moab?
It's the Job's brothers.
No.
No, it's
Edom and Moab.
Ammon
Yeah.
and Moab.
Moab
I
is
read
the
that.
one,
It's
That
the
name
children of
in the Old Testament somewhere.
the one
Is it
whose
Noah's
wife
son?
turns
No.
into
Lot.
Lot.
Oh,
Yeah,
Lot.
into Lot.
Uh, what's the name?
Lot's two children
Yeah.
Children
with his
girls.
daughters.
Yeah.
Moab and Moab.
Moab.
Ammon and
Ammonites.
Moab.
And
Yeah.
Ammonites.
Amon.
You're right.
Yeah.
So the two children of Ammon
And Moab.
and Moab, the children of Lot, the Jews that go to these three mountains, when the Antichrist surrounds, they're the only ones that will survive. Those that escape, that are elderly or men or pregnant women, women given suck, that's the only exit, is to those three mountains. And when you look on a map, they're really close to Israel. They're not far at all.
But are they outside of the Israel country?
Yeah, they're outside of
Mhm.
Israel, the
Boundaries.
border.
Oh, that's why they won't be touched at all.
And they're into these, and strangely enough, they're all Muslim
What?
right now,
Right now.
you know?
Are they not the wilderness?
No.
No.
And now, when you read down from verse 15, let's read down to verse 21.
Can I finish it?
Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that our flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. Pray, for
21.
then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be.
So what you have here is from verses 15 down to 16, you have the middle of the 7-year tribulation with the slaughter of Israel, and Christ saying, now is great tribulation. So from this point going down, and you can only read now from verse 22 up to 29, and you have the end of the great tribulation. So 3.5 years is found only in these few verses. 3.5 years of what the Antichrist is going to do. How much information is that?
It's not much.
Very, very little. Like Revelation 18, we're almost at the end of it, and we're just in the middle now when the abomination happens, the slaughter of the Jews. And then chapter 19 starts the Lord Jesus coming back. That's the end of the great tribulation. So the 3.5 years, where are you supposed to find information as to what's going on in the earth and so on? that's when you really need to turn to the minor prophets. And we're not doing that today. But in order for us to try and understand what's going on during the 3.5 years, there's not a lot being taught, as you can well imagine. Look at what we have here, verse number 22 to 29. If someone wants to read this, and you'll see something of what's going on during the Great Tribulation.
And except those days shall be shortened, there shall no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall shew great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I have told you before. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken.
So you see,
there they
after we've ended now the 3.5 year Great Tribulation, it's over.
Yeah.
The whole 7 year, it's finished.
Yeah.
So the shaking of them, this is the devil's angels being shaken out of heaven.
That already happened in the dead center of the tribulation.
Oh, so
This
what is
looks
this?
like
This is the
Stars fall
the
from
other
heaven.
3.5
it.
years.
No, this
What
looks
is
like the
this?
physical falling of stars, and not
actual
a literal.
stars, not literal. Oh.
Not a metaphorical. No,
Oh.
not metaphorical. This is more literal. Now, can you examine for a brief moment the warning of Christ? He talks about the elect in the Great Tribulation. So there are Christians there. The very elect are there. And he talks about something else. These false Christs that are rising, he mentions a place. He says the desert.
Yeah, that's Islam. That's that part of the world.